Nothing regular about our board meetings. They're always extraordinary. At 7:02, roll call shows that all board members are here. We will now stand for the pledge, and then we will remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under I move we adopt the agenda as presented.
I second. Oh,
Wow, look at them running
ready.
to that.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we are going to go to 3A. Monica?
Yep, we'll do the awards. You can come forward and stand in front of the dais. Good evening, President Ordway, members of the governing board, Superintendent Finch, and our special guests. We are excited to be back in person to share some of our district's successes. It will look a little different tonight. No handshaking. Masks and social distancing are required, but the excitement of each accomplishment will still be evident. The Arizona Educational Foundation has announced the 2020 A+ Schools of Excellence. 3 DVUSD schools have been recognized for their superior ability to identify and meet the academic and non-academic needs of their students. The application process and evaluations were conducted during the 2019-2020 school year, and several of the administrative staff have moved to different campuses. Therefore, we have invited both current and former administrators to be honored tonight. In the coming weeks, we will post their inspiring stories on our website, in social media, and share their good news with our local newspapers and magazines. Principals and assistant principals, after I finish reading about your school, please pick up your banner and make your way up to the dais for a group picture. Canyon Springs STEM Academy is a school that encompasses a strong culture of collaboration. As you walk through the campus, you see colorful hallways that depict the theme of each grade. In their staff meeting, they describe themselves as full of exploration, STEM family fun, and peace, love, and fun. Congratulations, Canyon Springs STEM Academy's principal, April Fraley, former Canyon Springs principal, Tricia Graham, assistant principal, Jamie Eldred, and the entire Canyon Springs staff. So Kayla, do you want the current principal to be in the center, or what do you want to do? Because so right now the current principal's in this, like former principal, assistant principal. Put the current in the center? Yeah. So April and Tricia, would you guys switch positions? Oh, is that because there you go. We're gonna. It's usually the case. And then Jamie, will you take the edge of the banner? Okay. Good. Oh, perfect. All right. Thank you. Congratulations. Oh, you know what, Kayla? Remind me, I want to switch it because I have a slate. Is it okay with the switches? Okay. All right. And please pick up your pins and your certificate for your school. All right, moving on. Desert Mountain students have a great deal of pride in their school and each other. Students are actively engaged in learning at each level. The evaluators for the Arizona Educational Foundation found that respect for all is evident. And the TIG, or Teamwork, Integrity, and Growth concept, is felt throughout the school. Congratulations, Principal Dr. Joanne Schwarting, Assistant Principal Amy Lee Grant, former Assistant Principal Tina Craig, and all of the Desert Mountain staff. So Joanne, will you be in the middle? I'll have you guys switch. See if that works. If you need me to switch them back, I can. Good? You good? Okay. Congratulations. All right. And last but certainly not least, Gavilan Peak School is an amazing campus where you will see an environment in which students are inspired to explore their limitless possibilities. You will see teachers and administration collaborating to develop unique and engaging learning opportunities, data-driven instruction, and a campus submersed in Mandarin culture. And we want to recognize the efforts of former Principal Chad Sigerston, who unfortunately passed away in June after a long battle with cancer. Chad instilled a strong culture of teamwork and determination that can be felt on campus to this day. Congratulations, Principal Ryan Putnick, Assistant Principal Tessa Garcia, former Assistant Principal Danielle Ware, and all of the Gavilan Peak staff. All right. Congratulations to all of our A+ Schools of Excellence students and staff.
All right, so we are moving to our always appreciated and our return to school report, Doctor. They're not leaving because you're giving the report. It's kind of the time when they leave. We forget that, right, Carrie?
I think they're leaving maybe because the finance reports are next. I'm not going to take any offense to that. I'm sure if Dr. Zerbach and the return to schools reports were next, that they would stay.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry, Heather. I see how much I was anticipating that report.
Right. It's okay. I don't feel overlooked at all. But
Get on with the numbers.
we actually don't have a lot of changes since our reports that we presented at the October meeting for September. We will start with the enrollment report. The enrollment report for this governing board meeting is as of the end of October, which was reporting as of October 30th, or the 61st day in session. At that time, we had 1,886 fewer students than the same time the year prior. A majority of those students are in our K through 8 classes, and that is even including our online students in that count as well. We're down about 1,700 students in our K through 8 and about 88 students in our high schools, for an overall average of about a 5.5% decrease in enrollment from this time last year. And I will take any questions on the enrollment report if there's anything specific you wanted to know about.
I have a question. At some point in time, I know that it's difficult for us to track everyone down that's not here, but perhaps in a Friday update at some point in time, could we see how many of these students went homeschool, not just to other schools, but actually to homeschool?
Madam President, that is a great question. And actually, we have recently acquired that data from our IS&T department and would be happy to share that. And I say we, I actually think that Mr. Miglorino has that data right now. So I'm saying we on his behalf.
Okay.
If there are no other questions, we'll move forward to the M&O budget report for the month ending October of 2020. We are still presenting this report the way that we did in September and October for the prior months, where we are not projecting any balance carry forward at this time. We know that at our next meeting in December, we will have a budget revision and we will see some movement on this report at that time. What's going to happen between now and December 30th is we will be moving some of these expenses from the M&O budget into our enrollment stability grant. We still do not have the exact amount of funding that we will receive through the enrollment stability grant. I think every time we meet, I keep saying that we expect that, next week or within the next week. And it keeps being moved downfield just a little bit. But with the 40th day having been passed pretty much for all school districts in Arizona, and with the time deadline looming, we are quite certain that we will receive those total amounts in the very near future. We have received confirmation from Arizona Department of Administration that they have our application and that we are a grant awardee. They just did not have any dollar value to that letter when they said, yes, you're going to receive some grant funding. So between December and January, what we will see is a decrease in the 2021 M&O budget, but also a decrease in the expenses. We typically look at our percent remaining at this time of year to see how we're trending toward remaining on budget. We talked a little bit about maybe a better way to look at that right now is the percent of the budget spent. And so for being a little over a third of the way through the school year, we are about 33% of the budget spent. So we are tracking well for the budget that we have and should continue to track well when we move money not only from the budget side, but the expenditure side as well. And we hope to have much more information about the enrollment stability grant. And of course, we'll have the budget revision in December. And with that, I will take any questions on the M&O budget report.
So since you're looking at that as the percentage spent, are the expenses distributed fairly evenly?
Now, I understand. I want to make sure I give you the correct title. I understand that perhaps we're going from Miss Tweedy to Dr. Tweedy this meeting.
Oh, yeah, it's okay.
No, I just want to give credit where credit is due. That's quite an accomplishment. Dr. Tweedy, members of the board, we don't have that information here, but we definitely could look at that and put it in a board update. We've actually been working with schools and with departments as well to see where we can recapture some of that budget for this school year. So we really have been asking folks to exercise caution and only be purchasing those items from M&O that are immediately necessary for the education of students.
All right, yeah, because my only concern in looking at it that way, it makes sense as long as the expenses are just,
Equitably distributed.
evenly.
Yeah.
So maybe you could give us that in the board update.
Yes, we can.
Thank
We'll do
you.
that. Thank you. All right. Thank you very much.
Before you go, Dr. Z, I just wanted to recognize that we have Boy Scouts in the room. Could you guys stand up and tell us your names, school, and what troops you're from? Caleb from Union Park, and who's your partner? Well, welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm guessing you're here for your citizenship badge, not just because you wanted to come to a meeting on a Tuesday night, right?
Well, they better get something.
Oh,
for
2
sitting
thumbs
through
up. Okay, we'll sign his paper first. Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Z.
They could just tell the truth, President Ordaway, that I believe you're here for the return to school report.
Wow, look at you go.
Wow. It is spreading, President Ordaway, I'm telling you. Okay. Okay. Good evening, President Ordaway, members of the board, Dr. Finch. As it has been and continues to be our pleasure to present to you this evening the Return to School report. Before we hit the updates for our Return to School work teams, I do want to take a minute to showcase some of the great work that our students are doing on campus and the great work that our staff continues to do as well. In this first slide, you can see on the left, or on my left, students in the Mandarin program at Gavilan Peak. It's a kindergarten student that is working hard on his writing. In the middle picture, we have Mrs. Sandlin, and she is working with second grade students on vowel sounds at Desert Sage. And all the way to the right, we have a student from North Terra Canyon in the community ed program that is working on the Lights After School program and doing some good activities. Okay, on this next slide, on my left, the first picture showcases a student from Barry Goldwater who is doing a solo in choir class. In the middle, we have Deer Valley High School students that are engaged in some great learning. And on the right, we can see a student from Mountain Ridge High School who is shooting a video for his high school career expo. And then in our third slide, showcasing our students, you can see some of the great work that our athletes are doing. And so to the left, you can see Boulder Creek High School in their badminton tournament. In the middle, we see Mountain Ridge against Boulder Creek in a family feud football battle. And on the right, we have members of the Deer Valley cross country team getting ready for the district cup. So again, just showcasing some of the great things that are happening on our campuses with our students and our staff. And so with that, it brings us to our first work team update, Return to School Safely. You will find in this first update a focus on updating you as far as how we are doing in the current COVID environment and how we plan to continue our in-person operations in this environment. Okay, so let's start off by providing some background info that will give us some context in terms of understanding where we started and where we are now. And so you will recall that at the start of this, the Arizona Department of Health Services released the Safely Returning to In-Person Instruction document, which provided guidance regarding the public health or the school health benchmarks. And those benchmarks are on the slide there for you to see. Those three benchmarks are the following: case counts, percent positivity, and the COVID-like illness. That original document put together some categorical rankings for those benchmarks in terms of the minimal spread, moderate spread, and substantial spread, and then gave recommendations as far as how public school districts should open based off of those metrics. Over the course of time, those metrics stayed in place. However, recently, and we talked about those metrics at our last board meeting because there was some discussion about what would need to happen for the district to consider switching to a new learning environment, whether that would be some type of, or a different alternate hybrid model or a return to a virtual environment. And so we started that discussion with you at our last board meeting. Since then, there has been a revision to that particular document that I showed you on the prior slide, the return to in-person instruction. And the Arizona Department of Health Services has updated their guidance. And the new guidance says that all three benchmarks should be in the red category when they recommend transitioning schools back to a virtual learning environment. Maricopa County Department of Public Health, on the next slide, has also updated their guidance to align with the Arizona Department of Health Services. And you can see that in the second bullet point where it states that all three benchmarks would be in that substantial category when they would recommend that you start prepping and considering that transition to the virtual environment. So our current status, and we're going to go into that in more detail with our graphs, you can see here. So our case count, it is in the substantial category, and you'll see in a second it's at 108 with our most recent metrics that were released. Our percent positivity is in the moderate category, and our COVID-like illness maintains in the minimal category at 4%. This slide and the next one capture what our metrics have looked like over the course of many weeks. You can see, as I stated before, the first graph on the cases per 100,000 shows that we have been on an uptick, and we've noted that for Friday board updates. And you can see again, as I said, we're at 108 right now. The threshold for the substantial was 100. And so we are in that particular category. Our rate of positivity, again, is at 6.43. The minimal threshold ends at 5% and then starts the moderate. And then for this particular metric to be in the substantial, it would need to be at 10% or more. And so you can see we are in the moderate. And then for COVID-like illness, you can see here that this particular metric maintained at the same percentage for quite a while, and now it is on a slight uptick. And so it was at 2 for many weeks, and now we find ourselves at the 4%, which is in the minimal or green spread category. Okay, so in addition, there's been some updated guidance from Maricopa County about additional items to consider when you are having conversations about potentially switching learning environments. And so these categories are on the website that parents, teachers, any community member could go and take a look at. And so you can see these here. I won't read those, but you can see that the first one is the level of community transmission. And those go to the metrics that I just showed you on the prior slides. And then you can see some of the others. And we're going to come back to these in just a second. Okay, so recently on Friday, November the 6th, Jenna and I, we did a consult with Maricopa County Department of Health. And the reason for that consult is they do recommend to check in with them if any of your three metrics reach the substantial category. And so we scheduled that check-in, and it was with Dr. Stemler, who is one of the epidemiologists, head epidemiologists that is with Maricopa County, and there were some others that joined her as well. In that consult, as is stated on the slide, we reviewed our public benchmark data, and then we examined many of those data points that were shown in that prior slide. And so you can see some of those that are listed here. One of the items that they wanted to look at in detail were actually the COVID numbers that are in our school. So again, this is different, I want to be clear, than the public health metric, because the public health metric is the case count in the community. This particular factor that they asked Jen and I to talk about in more detail is our actual COVID numbers in the school. So how many of our students have a positive test for COVID, and how many of our staff members have a positive test for COVID? And so, as you know, we do have a dashboard that we have been collecting this data over the past several weeks. And so we reviewed that with them. We also reviewed our mitigation systems. They asked Jen and I to talk about things such as how well are the students and the staff wearing masks? They asked us about our lunch procedures. They asked about our sanitation in terms of tell us about your cleaning. When do you disinfect? When do you sanitize? And so we reviewed in detail many of those procedures that we use. They also asked some pointed questions to Jenna about our ability to staff. Questions about, so what kind of sick rates are you seeing? And what is the level of challenge, if you will, in order to place folks in those positions in order to continue the in-person schooling? And so those, again, we reviewed with them. And at the end of the consult, Maricopa County, first of all, as they have always told us, that they believe we're doing a good job in terms of our mitigation plan. all of the pieces that you can find on the COVID plan website that we have, they said to continue doing. And it appears with our data that it is looking positive because COVID is not spreading in our schools. Again, it looks from what we can see that the COVID is coming from the outside when we have our cases, because it is true we do have cases that are on our dashboard and the community can see those. But heretofore, the COVID is not spreading when it's at school. And so that was a positive piece that we heard from Maricopa County. Okay, and so this continues some of our takeaways that we have here. So one of the pieces that Dr. Stimler wanted to focus on with us is that at this point, schools are still likely the safest place for our kids, and that it is likely that community spread could worsen if students went back. And the reasons are that the students, they may congregate with others without masks, and they may be put in other situations where the mitigation strategies are not in place. And so, in short, as the first bullet point states, schools are the places where the mitigation strategies are implemented and where they are monitored for that. We also know the importance of the social emotional support. I'm sure many of you saw the news conference that the state superintendent and Dr. Kara Chris from ADHS put on earlier this week. And they talked about the importance of the social emotional support and knowing the struggles that many of our students have been facing since the pandemic started. With this social emotional support, we know that when students are in school, the teachers can check in on those students. Counselors can check in. Nurses can check in. We also know that we have our programs with our before and after school, which add in additional supervision for our students, again, where mitigation strategies are implemented and monitored. As far as also our academic performance for our kids, we know that they are doing better. We hear that, Dr. Galligan and I, consistently from our principals, that they are seeing improvement in the performance with our students since they've been in school. And especially in our high school students, where we know, as I put in this slide, that it's high stakes. This is for a diploma. They need the credit for that. And so it's very important that our students are provided those opportunities. And then the final subpoint there you can see is that it resembles the normal as much as possible. And so even though that normal may be quite abnormal, right, for us in the COVID world, but it is providing them an environment with something that they're familiar with and can have more predictability in the days that come forward. We also know that with our student subgroups that they're doing better in person. And by student subgroups, I'm referring to our students that have disabilities, our English language learners, and we have other students as well, such as our students that are in group home, that they tend to do much better, both social, emotionally, and academically when they are in person on our campuses to receive that instruction. And we also know an important piece is that our kids are receiving a meal each day, and that may not be the case for some of our students in their own particular home environments. And so with the regulations that are in place now, you already know that students can receive a meal at no cost, and that can be for all of our students through the rest of this school year. So here's a couple of slides. This slide is interesting because I wanted to talk to you some about the quarantine process that we have and how that's impacting us, because I know there are some questions from you and perhaps from the community about what is some of the data, what does the data tell us about the number of students that are being quarantined? And so for that, I wanted to give you a little slice here from the high school lens, because at our high schools, we do have, in terms of the amount of cases, there are a larger number of cases at our high schools than are at our other schools. So it's disproportionate to that. Now, it's not necessarily disproportionate when you look at the actual student enrollment, okay, for that. So because we know our high schools enroll many more students. But if you look at it in terms of a school being its own entity, the high schools do have more. And so partially because of that, I chose to look at this slide in terms of how COVID is impacting that from the quarantine perspective. And so you can see that we looked at 2 14-day cycles when we were in school at the high school level. And that first cycle was started on that Wednesday because the Monday and Tuesday were off for our fall break. And you can see through that 2-week period, we ranged at our high schools from 1 to 7 student positive cases. So again, our school that had the lowest number of cases or the fewest number of cases was at 1, and the school that had the highest number was at 7. And you can see that in terms of a percentage of the students who needed to quarantine versus the percentage of students who were eligible to attend the on-campus option, that you can see here, that ranged from a 0.66% to 9.1%. And the median is 1.5. And so that's another way to look at it, that if you think about the median in the middle, that 98.5% of the students were eligible to be on campus and were not quarantined. So I know that sometimes we hear from folks that, oh, it appears that all the students are needing to leave because of quarantining, and that is not accurate. Now, it is a lot of work. It is not to discount the work that the administrators and our campus nurses are doing. I can see Jenna out of the side of my eye, and she's nodding her head because she knows the work that goes into doing these procedures. And so it is a lot of work to do it, but I do want to be clear that the vast majority of our students are on campus and they are eligible to be on campus, that they are not in quarantine. So let's look at the second cycle. The second cycle begins on October the 26th, and you'll see that runs through last Friday. And so again, when you look at this particular date range, our high school that had the fewest number of students with a positive case was 2. And our high school that had the highest number was at 10 during that 2-week cycle. And you can see there that our quarantine range actually decreased in that particular window. And so whereas the prior one was a little over 0.5% to just under 10, this one was at 0% to a little over 5.5%, with the median being 2.6. And so again, just to make sure that we're clear in the translation of that, so that is telling us that over 97% of the students were on campus because they were eligible to be on campus for that. And so, and the other students then were in a particular quarantine. Okay, with our dashboard, this is just a review for those who may be watching who haven't watched before, that we do publish on a weekly basis a COVID-19 DVUSD dashboard, and it has a very user-friendly URL. It is simply dvusd.org/dashboard. And so community members, staff members, any stakeholder can go onto this website and they can view our dashboard, which lists the total number of students and staff in one column, which is followed by the column that lists the current active COVID-19 cases and the description of what that means in terms of meeting the criteria to be an active case is listed above in the description. And then we also show the percentage of the student and staff population that has a active COVID case. And so you can see on that when you look at the percentages, it remains very, very, very low. One change that you did not see before is that we did add in a line for the district office buildings, and so that is below the transportation line. Both Jenna and myself did receive many requests that we would add that particular line into the dashboard so that our employees who work at, whether it be here at the 15th Avenue Central location or perhaps at not at transportation, maybe purchasing, Jenna, would be another one, or some of our maintenance facilities, that they too would have that. And so I believe we have had at least 3 updates that have been on there. We did put, because I do know that some of the social media has sometimes said, well, we don't believe that it's accurate, that the numbers are out there. And so we put in the parent update last week that there is a slight time gap on Mondays between the time that we look to verify which cases are active in this school. We review those with the principals. We also review those with the department leaders to when we publish those on the actual website. And so if a case does end up coming to us during that slight window that is open, it is possible that it would not make it on there. And so we did put that on the parent update last week so that our parents could know that when cases come in on a Monday, sometimes there could be the possibility for it not to be put up there because it would be in that time gap. And it would, thank you, Jenna. And so Jenna said that it would be on there for the following dashboard update. Okay, let's talk a little bit about outbreaks. And so although you know I am not a fan of that particular word, that is the word that ADHS has defined as being what we need to report out to in terms of our staff and community stakeholders when an outbreak happens. So just to review, an outbreak in short is when there are 2 or more cases at a school where the transmission occurred at this school. And that could be between student to student, that could be between student to staff, that could be between staff to staff. And so it's any way that two folks would have received the transmission at school, that would be an outbreak. So you can see that heretofore we have had 5 outbreaks in our system. 3 of the outbreaks have been at the high school level, and 2 of those have been at the elementary level. You can see in the second bullet point that 1 of the 5 outbreaks did not involve students, and so you can put that together very easily, that outbreak then involved only staff members at one of our schools. One of the real positive pieces from my perspective in terms of looking at our systems is captured in that third bullet point, and that you can see that in the 4 out of 4 outbreaks that involved the students, the second student that became COVID positive was first identified in the original close contact process of tracing. And so that second student was in a quarantine phase for that. And so again, we view that as a very much of a positive piece for us, that those students were correctly identified during that contact tracing process. And then, unfortunately, we did later learn that in those situations, the second student had contracted COVID-19. When that happens, we do report that through our reporting systems to county, and then county is responsible for notifying us about the outbreak. They do some specific investigations that they do to ensure that where they believe that the transmission most likely occurred at school, because I can tell you that sometimes it can get a little tricky. There are situations involved when students may ride together to school or have other somewhat limited contacts outside of school, and so they do their very thorough investigation. And so sometimes it does not get confirmed by the county right after the student may contract the virus, if that makes sense. Sometimes it may take several days for the county to report back to us and say, Jenna or Gary, you do have a confirmed outbreak, and so now you need to send out the letter. And so that brings me to the next step. So when the outbreak does happen, we do send out the letter to our staff and to our parent population. And the letter comes pretty much 99% straight from ADHS and the county. There's a template letter that they require us to send out. We offer a few of our mitigation strategies in the letter to make sure that parents know about the plan that we are implementing in our schools. And then the last step really that I think I would mention here is that Jenna and I we always do in the 5 cases that it has happened, we offer our services to the principal, if the principal desires it, to have a staff meeting with the staff to offer them an opportunity to talk directly to Jenna and myself about the outbreak, because I do know that term can cause anxiety for folks. And so just hearing that, there could be additional questions that the staff might have about what the letter means, and then also what are we doing in terms of the plan to keep COVID from spreading. So as I mentioned, in all 5 of the circumstances that are here, the did request that Jen and I do a staff meeting. It's done via Zoom. We get on there for approximately 20 to 40 minutes, and we have answered questions from our staff members. And then usually at the end, Jen and I will stay on for any individuals that want a little bit of extra individual time if they have some questions they didn't feel comfortable asking in front of the rest of the staff. Okay. So that brings me to our next steps. And so this is obviously in conjunction with the recommendations that we have received from Maricopa County Department of Public Health. And we have been doing our best to stick alongside Maricopa County Department of Public Health really since March 13th. That's the day that I sometimes say was Friday the 13th, when the world began changing very dramatically for us. And so we continue with our DVUSD COVID mitigation plan. And again, for any folks who are new to viewing our board meetings and do not know about some of our resources, I put the link to our COVID plan on the slide so that folks can see it. Again, it's a very user-friendly URL, dvusd.org/COVID plan. And you can see here on this slide many of the mitigation strategies that we are going to continue to do. We plan to continue the strict enforcement of our mask wearing. We plan to continue doing our daily sanitizing and our disinfecting. We continue to use our contact tracing procedures, and that, of course, is both from Jenna and her HR team, and then from ALS when we work with these student cases. We continue with our hand sanitizing and our hand washing throughout the day. We also continue with our modified lunch procedures at our K6s and our K8s. If you follow Dr. Finch or I on Twitter, you have seen examples of some of the procedures that are in use. You know that our students, by and large, face one direction in the K6 and K8 world. They have additional space that we have put in there for them to space out some when they're in the cafeteria. And then we also look at potting the students in the vast majority of the situations when they do recess outside. Okay. We also, and that links to the next bullet point, which is continuing the use of potting when possible. Also, at our middle and our high schools, you know through the board updates that we continue to use the block scheduling. And I know that this is not necessarily the favorite flavor of ice cream for some of our teachers that are out there. But that said, it's an important piece to the overall mitigation plan. It helps with reducing the number of transitions for our students and for our staff, throughout the school day. It also helps for our cleaning and our disinfection plan, and it also supports with our contact tracing procedures. And so I know that our principals have talked about this with Dr. Chunis and Dr. Galligan, and so that is something that the team looks to work to provide additional professional development to our teachers to help them as we continue with the block scheduling, because we want them to feel effective and we want them to feel good about what they are doing. And so that's something I know that we are looking at. Also, as Ms. Mock has informed you for the passport updates, you are aware about the air purifiers, which came as a suggestion from the board as well. And so those have arrived, and I believe there is a recent order. Mr. Miglerino was updating some principals this morning about how that last order is working to get out to the principals and to the buildings very soon. But many of those air purifiers are already in the classrooms. Again, I would say if you follow me on Twitter, you have seen I've captured some pictures of those out with our choir and our band students as they have the multiple air purifiers actually in their spaces at the high school level. Also, we will continue providing our resources to the community, such as our COVID testing information, our dashboard updates. We have a symptoms page. And again, we have updated the website with very parent-friendly URLs. And so if you've seen those, they really are. It's just DVUSD.org, and then it's the main topic, which will take you to that page. So whether it's the dashboard, COVID testing is one of our URLs, symptoms is one of our URLs. So it's very easy for our parents to go on there and to see what they need to do. And then also to continue to doing our check-ins with our stakeholders. And so I think our principals at times probably say, oh my gosh, another Zoom call with Dr. Z and the crew. But I know that many of them, they do appreciate the consistent communication that they receive from the various departments here at district to make sure that they are in the know and can support their teachers and their staff and their parents to the best of their ability. Other next steps are that we plan to keep our staff and our parents informed through our written updates. As you know, we have a Monday parent update that we send out to our community. So Monica supports us with that. That parent update is always posted on the website for our parents to see as well. And our website receives continual updates to support our parent population. Our fireside chats also continue. We did take a temporary pause during the week of October the 14th, because in our original commitment to the staff, we said we would do our fireside chats through the last week of our final phased-in implementation. And so with that, we did find, as we mentioned to you, that our attendance at the fireside chats was going down dramatically. And we heard from many because they were in their schools and they were working, doing their jobs and busy preparing for their next day's assignments. And so we did, though, inform the staff members through Dr. Finch's Monday letter to the staff, which he continues to send out each Monday, that we would have another fireside chat this Thursday so that we could give them an update with what we are discussing today with you regarding this topic, because we do know that there are many that are tuning in to hear about that and want to know more. And then, as I mentioned before, our administrator check-ins. Also, we'll continue to monitor the public health benchmark metrics. And so even though I have told you this before, I will reiterate it, that I truly am in communication on an almost daily basis with Maricopa County Department of Public Health. If you called Department of Public Health and asked for Ethan, who is the head of their schools division, he will say he knows Gary very well. And there are others. When I talked to Dr. Stemler at the consult, Jenna was there, and she heard Dr. Stemler at the end. She said, yes, and I know Gary is well known in this whole department. So we really do keep in close contact with them, and we get their feedback and their recommendations for what they think is the best for us. We will continue to monitor our COVID cases in the schools. And so we will post those on our dashboard. And when we have those COVID cases, we do check in with our principals, and we give them guidance, as you've known before, whether it's with the staff. Jenna and her team does that. And when it's with students, we have our Slack management system. So they're getting specific guidance on each case when it happens. And so we will continue to monitor those. And we'll continue to look at our attendance rates for both our staff and our students to make sure that they are at rates that we see from the 40,000-foot view that are consistent with what we think they would be in this environment. And then the fourth bullet point is really with Jenna and her crew, is that they will continue to monitor our ability to staff. If you talk to our principals, it is no secret that staffing is a challenge. Now, staffing was a challenge before COVID in many of our positions. And so when you hear folks say it's tough to staff a special ed classroom now, it's tough to staff a custodial position, I don't think Jenna would contradict me in saying that none of those things were easy before COVID. And so they continue with COVID with those. And so it has been a challenge. But again, heretofore, Jenna and her team have found a way to do it, and our schools continue. And again, you saw some of those pictures of the great work that the students and the staff are doing. And so that continues to bring many smiles to the faces of our parents and I know in our general community. And so with that, I would end again by saying the important point that Maricopa County sees it the way that I said it before, in that our schools are the safest place for our students. The COVID virus, it is not spreading by and large in our schools. And we know that through all of our schools. Dr. Finch, he was in his meetings with the Nevick neighbors. And so they are looking at some of their COVID numbers. And we are seeing that the COVID is not spreading from student to student to student to staff to staff to staff, and they're out there at schools. And the reason, again, is because we have mitigation measures that we are implementing, and we are monitoring those as well. And so because of the fact that schools are the safest place, we do want to continue to do the things that I mentioned in the prior slides. Now, with that said, I will say that some of us on executive cabinet, we still are engaging in some planning conversations regarding what if, and the what ifs could be what if numbers look very different in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, in 5 weeks. What if numbers look very different in 3 months? What if the COVID numbers that are on our dashboard change dramatically from what you've seen over the past 3 weeks? We've ranged anywhere from roughly about 25 to 40. And so what if, and again, hypothetically, those skyrocket and go through the roof? What would we look to do? And so we are engaging in some of those planning conversations because that's the prudent thing to do for our staff and for our students. And so we will continue to do those. We will loop in with our administrators for that. And we plan to do that at our fireside chat as well with our staff that tune in this Thursday, so that they are aware of some of the items that we are looking at, so that if a change to the delivery model is something that Maricopa County says that, yep, this is something that we absolutely think you need to do, that we are in a position to do that in a manner that is efficient and safe for all of those involved. And so with that said, I believe that's the end of this section. Actually, I just have one more here, and this showcases the communication that we've had to our parents and our staff. And so you can see those. I think you're aware of those, but it does show the dates that we have communicated with our stakeholders. And so with that, I am okay. I'm looking at Ms. Taylor because, as Dr. Finch says, we know that she runs the show. In terms of, I can pause here since this is the end of the first work team session for questions, or we can continue on throughout the rest.
We're going to do questions after after each. Yes, after that.
Okay. And so
I'm
with
going to
the-
guess that Ms. Tweedy has a question.
Yeah, I had a couple questions on that. I just thought if we ask them with each section, we can forget.
Well, go ahead, ask.
So, so I had a couple questions. So my first question would be pertaining to the dashboard. So one question I've been getting is when community members get an outbreak letter, that means by definition there was minimally 2 cases and the dashboard says 1 case. So I guess that's causing confusion. So I don't know if it would make sense to have cases resolved or something on there as well as active cases, because that I think is causing confusion and maybe some skepticism.
Dr. Zerbeck.
Sure. Yeah. Dr. Tweedy, members of the board. So I think, again, that would go back to that piece I was talking about in terms of the delay at times from the county. And so if it takes, for instance, in one case, it took the county over 10 days to go through their full investigation to confirm whether it was an outbreak or not. And so because of that time gap, some of those cases had already resolved and their isolation period had ended. And so that is why then those numbers would have been removed from the dashboard, because those students are no longer in a isolation phase, if you will.
And that's
so,
why I
yeah,
said it
yeah.
might, I mean, it may be worth considering having
Sure.
recovered cases, because when people see 1 and they receive a letter that says 2, I figured that was why, but that's why I suggested maybe.
Sure. Point taken. We
Do you
can
have
look
any
at that.
more questions on dashboard?
But are you done, Doctor? I understand the confusion that that getting that letter and going to the dashboard looks, and I've also seen and read some comments regarding the dashboard. However, I'm a little concerned about putting resolved cases or recovered cases on there, depending on how those numbers may look. Could we possibly put something in the letter that speaks to the time gap between when we find out, when we report it? So there's an explanation of why, when I get that letter, I go to the data dashboard, there might be only 1 case at that point. It's just a little bit of a different perspective. And I worry how sometimes people look at numbers and it can create a panic that we don't intend it to create.
Sure, President Orley, Mrs. O'Brien, I think that is certainly something that we can look at. I guess I would say I too share, I share the concern that the county shares about the numbers at times creating more anxiety than what is needed. And so from county's perspective, again, just to reiterate, they are not in favor of the dashboard that we are putting out on our website. Even when we did our consult, again, we talked about that, and they reiterated that is not a recommendation that they are putting forth because they believe it provides undue stress upon our community by seeing that. That said, we do recognize that there was a desire from the stakeholders to have something like that, where we would have an active type of case dashboard. And so I think to your point, Mrs. O'Brien, perhaps that could be a way to bridge what Dr. Tweedy is saying, as well as in that particular letter, making a specific link to or connection to the dashboard. Because in the example, in the one case when it took over a week for the county to do the investigation, we did put that information in the letter, but we did not make the connection to the dashboard. So we put a couple sentences in there about how it took an extended period of time to find out about this, and so that's why there's a delay. But we could improve that letter by making a specific connection to the dashboard, saying this explains why when you see the dashboard there's 1 case listed.
And maybe also include that directly on the dashboard, that explanation potentially. And can I ask a clarifying question regarding our data dashboard numbers?
Sure.
If a student or a staff member gets sick on Sunday and then does end up testing positive for COVID, there's the potential that they didn't expose anybody at school, but we would still report that person as a positive case on our dashboard. Is that correct?
Yes, President Ordway, Mrs. O'Brien, that is correct. So if a student, for instance, became symptomatic later in the evening on a Sunday, because this happens, and then gets a rapid test, or if for some reason a student went to get tested on a Sunday evening, they were asymptomatic, but perhaps they went for a close contact reason. Again, the close contact rule is 48 hours, and so it's possible that that would not be something that there would be, again, to reference your beginning part, where there would be tracing during a school day. And for that matter, sometimes there might not be school on a Friday, what we've had, or a Monday and a Tuesday, correct? But it would be counted on the dashboard because, again, that goes for anyone who is excluded due to the quarantine measures from Maricopa County Department of Health. And that would be the same for a staff member as well, not just for a student.
Thank you for that clarification.
Now, and if I could add, Mrs. O'Brien, to that, again, it depends, though, in terms of when it's reported to us to make it sure it's on the dashboard. And that's, again, why I say there can be at times a delay, especially on Mondays, because if the parent does not report it until a certain time on Monday, there could be a gap when we look to verify, confirm this is a positive case that's there. And so, again, sometimes that happens. And I also hope, too, because I've said this comment to various folks from the community, that the dashboard, the intent of the dashboard is to give folks a snapshot of what COVID is looking like in our schools. And we make every intention to make it as accurate as possible for us. And so, but there is possible, and I'm just repeating again because I've seen it out there on some of the social media posts where folks say the district is not putting it up there on purpose. They don't want folks to know that there's COVID in the school. And that could not be farther from the truth, that we really our intent is to keep it as accurate as possible. But it takes time to do that. It is not an easy process where you just say, oh, yeah, throw it up on there and do it. There's a process to confirm things with county because folks do make errors. They say, oh, it's COVID, and then it's not COVID. And even some of our staff members at times can be confused with that when they look at a laboratory result. And so it takes a little bit of time. Again, we verify those with our school principals. And so that is the reason that it's possible a case may not be up there, especially on a Monday.
Thank you.
Dr. Zerbeck, is there a specific or a consistent time that you update the dashboard or that dashboard's updated?
Yes, President Ordway, we have aimed to post the update around 4 o'clock on Mondays.
And is that denoted somewhere like last updated at? Like, can we put that in there?
I don't believe we put the actual time. We put the date range that's on there. And so for parents that look at it, they'll see that the date ranges from a Monday to a Monday. And that's a key piece. It's not a weekly Tuesday to Monday. And we do the Monday to Monday to capture what we talked about earlier when we have cases that may have missed on the time gap on that date. And so that is why if you see the most recent one, it'll read 11/2 to 11/9.
Okay.
But we can put something on there in terms of a time. But in general, there's a few hours gap between when it posts on Monday on the dashboard at 4 to when we stop receiving more reports.
Okay, because I think maybe with that explanation that there is a time lapse, not from us, but we're trying to, what Dr. Tweedy and Mrs. O'Brien were talking about, that might be enough because some of the communication that's out there is, we found out that there were blank people at 9 o'clock in the morning and here they updated it and it's not even on there. So perhaps that explanation that we were talking about would be.
Sure, we can continue that. Again, we had a piece in last Monday's update, but we can put that in there, and then also perhaps put a little bit more detail in the outbreak letters, President Ordway as well, when there may be some confusion with that regarding the dashboard.
Okay, and then we know that we need to mask up to keep our schools open because we're not trying to spread it from the inside out. It's coming from the outside in, so that would mean responsibility when you're off of the campus also, and that would be employees and students. Getting to resources for parents, now that most of the caregivers and the parents are back to work. Students go to school, I'm sneezing. For whatever reason, I wasn't kept home. There might be employees that feel bad because they know that mom and dad are working. So I think it's just their allergies. So I don't do kind of what we're supposed to do. I don't know if that's it's just a scenario that's out there. Could we get some resources for these caregivers and parents where they could maybe leave their children? Because I'm not saying that we have it at school, but there used to be Mendy's Place, and I don't even know if Mendy's Place is open during COVID. But if we could maybe research some places for parents to bring their sick children.
President Orley, I can. Are you referring to students who are showing symptoms or students who are in quarantine or both?
I'm talking about Johnny and Sally got dropped off at school, and they both were sneezing in the classroom, and that's to be reported, correct?
Correct.
And they have a slight fever, but they have a fever. They go to the nurse, and now what do we do with the kid because mom and dad are both working full-time during the day? So I'm just saying, like, resources for that.
Sure. I can, President Orley, I can inquire with the county again about that. I'm not aware of any of those right now due to the COVID restrictions that are out there, but I will certainly review with them again if there are some resources that we can provide to the parents.
Well, I'm just thinking because if a teacher or an employee, teacher mainly because they're going to be with the kids mostly, has symptoms, they can stay home and they can Zoom their class from home if they feel well enough, correct? Is that still true? COVID or not, they can teach from home if they're sick?
The staff members?
Uh-huh.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so we've made an effort for them, so they're not coming to school sick. So I'm just trying to figure out something for the student side of it.
Sure.
And I think, other than you guys are doing an awesome job, everybody's doing an awesome job. This is for Jim, and it has to do with a little bit of cleaning. Have we seen that we're able to keep up with our cleaning supplies with everyone needing all of the disinfectant? Or maybe that's a Heather question, because I know we had 400 million gallons, but I didn't know how far it's going to last. And that's my last question.
President Ordway, I think it might be a tag team event
Okay.
to answer that question. We do have some supply chain issues when it comes to restocking. For the most part, cleaning supplies we've been okay with, but when it comes to some of the PPE stuff, that's where Ms. Mock can provide some additional information. I think we're awaiting some items to be able to rebuild our inventory, and we certainly did have some challenges when it came to cleaning in terms of getting some of the devices. We were using electrostatic guns at some point in time. We've ordered those, I think, on 2 occasions. Neither of those have been received to date, and that goes back to the end of March when those orders were placed. So yes, we do have some concerns, but nothing that would compromise our mitigation plans.
Dr. Tweedy.
I just had a couple more questions. So specific to our ability to staff. So a few things I've been hearing, and so I'll let you speak to it. The first thing I want to know is between high schools, does it come from the district or is it a high school decision if they're going to give extra duty pay when teachers are on sub-row? Because I was informed one high school sent an email to their staff that they didn't get sub money, so they're not going to continue to pay, and then other high schools were paying teachers.
Yeah. President Ordway, Dr. Tweedy, I do understand why that question is being asked. I think that there has been confusion between what sub rotation expectations were in the past compared to what we are attempting to do this year.
Jenna, is your microphone on?
It is on, but you're not hearing me? Is that better? Get really close. Okay, so starting over. I do believe that there's been some misunderstanding in comparing what we have done historically to what we need to do this year. So historically, if you look at the certified manual, it does say that a staff can come to the conclusion that they will or will not pay for sub-rotation or class coverage during a prep. That's not typically an option that a high school takes. It's usually an elementary option that is taken, but that is likely why there is confusion. Recently, Heather and her team have updated, and Heather, please correct me if I'm wrong, each campus with their sub allocation. The intent there is to make sure that each location has the capacity to pay for that rotation when teachers are covering for one another. So if you are hearing that, Dr. Tweedy, then we will make the effort again in this week's meeting, this Friday, with all our administrators to know that they can do that on their campuses.
Well, and I guess it shouldn't be a can, a can, because to me there wouldn't be equity with teachers at one school getting paid for sub-row and teachers at another school. I think they should all be compensated. It should be a district expectation. It shouldn't vary.
I used the wrong word.
Oh.
So I wouldn't say can. For this year, it was our desire that every campus would be able to do that.
Okay. And so, and I guess it would be in the board update. I guess I would want to understand, how are you evaluating your ability to staff? Like, is there a certain threshold of absence? Because I am hearing, and it is anecdotal, and we didn't get in the board update how many times sub-row or class splits were happening, what I thought Ms. Reed had asked for. But I'm hearing, so only anecdotally, I don't have that teachers are getting asked to sub-row constantly. And I think if are honest with people, there are some campuses that are fairly close to the breaking point on being able to staff themselves at this point. And so just to have the data on what is the threshold where you say we can no longer staff ourselves.
President Ordway, Dr. Tweedy, we do not have a percentage threshold. We do evaluate it every morning. Each morning we look at our absence report and identify whether or not we can cover those absences. We have been in the position on a variety of occasions where we don't want a class split. That is the last resort, as I shared with you on a couple of occasions, and only will be utilized where we know we can appropriately distance students at a location where there are not many students. So we have deployed, HR has deployed on 3 separate occasions staff members to cover classrooms. CIAS has deployed, Dr. Tunis has deployed her staff to cover. I'm sure I'm missing others that have been deployed, classified and certified to cover these areas. We haven't had to do that this last week. We have stabilized to a degree, but we anticipate additional peaks in the future. So we do have these lists that we can rely on. If we were to exhaust that as well and not have the capacity to run for a period of time, our option is to notify parents and to let them know that we cannot run that class right now, and let them know for what period of time we would not be able to operate it. As far as comprehensively a location, we can't run it in many areas. That would also be case by case, and we may have to notify parents that a grade level does not have the capacity to run in person during a period of time. We just have not been, or even close to, needing to do that. I do want to apologize to you, however. It was my understanding that the board wanted to know when we split classes, because the campuses, per the plan, are not required to inform us if they go on to sub-rotation. They are required to request from us a class split, and they have to get permission from us to do something like that. So I would not have that information for you right now, the sub-rotation information. I do know that our campuses are utilizing it, but they do not report to us when they do.
Well, so my concern is if there's no limitation put on this, there are teachers who are losing their preps constantly, and they're being asked to teach both online and in person. And what happens when you teach online, you realize how many 3-second statements you make to a student that are now turning into multiple emails. I didn't hear what you said. Did you say this is due Friday? And you're sending 30 emails. And you do become aware of all those little comments you make, but they're not getting their preps and they're getting asked. So I just don't know that we're really considering our ability to staff with how much some of these teachers are getting burnt out. And I think it perpetuates increased absenteeism because then they go on leave. Then they start checking their PTO time and they quit coming in because they're getting called to sub all the time. So I think it increases absenteeism. So, I mean, there maybe should be, when you think of our ability to staff, a limit on how often you can make a teacher give up their prep to go on sub row.
Okay, I don't know if you had an answer for that, if you wanted to process it and send us something in the Friday update, but if we could move on to, okay. After this, we can move on to the next part. Go ahead.
Okay. So my question is, you mentioned that if a staff member is feeling ill, or maybe like they get up, they're congested, but they don't have COVID diagnosis, and they haven't come into contact with anyone with COVID, they are allowed to Zoom from home. What about students who maybe they've got a stuffy nose or a sore throat and they're not getting a COVID test? They don't know if they've been exposed to anyone with COVID. Are they allowed to Zoom into their classrooms? Because I'm hearing that schools have a list, and that if you're not officially in quarantine, that you're not allowed to Zoom in. And I just wondered if that's accurate. And if it is, doesn't that encourage parents to send their kids in when maybe they would be better off to stay at home?
President Ordway, Ms. Tweedy, Ms. Frank, I'm going to semi-defer to Dr. Galligan and Dr. Chunas, who likely have more detailed information than me on this. I do know that some of our schools do have a Zoom list for the students, and it's part of a system that they have. So when we either inform them of a student who needs to quarantine or who is going to self-isolate, or when they find out first, that they have a process which is automated, and that informs staff members of this particular student, and that student may go on a particular Zoom list for them, so that they are aware, and also so that they can make contact with the parents and the student about the information needed in order to join that class. Dr. Galligan or Dr. Chunas, is there any other information you could add to that from your conversations with the schools?
President Ordway, Ms. Frank, when we worked with the teams before we did the phase-in, this was a pretty large concern and question from our teachers. Paula and Kathy White worked with teachers at all levels. When we think about a student who is congested and is home but does not have COVID, if we think about any other year, that student would be at home safe while they were not feeling well, and teachers would provide when they returned or at some point the lessons and the material they missed. So when we talked in those groups with our teachers, we felt that for that situation, we would follow more like our non-COVID year than COVID. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Chunas because she worked closely with those teams.
President Ordway, Ms. Frank, members of the board. We did work with the teams in deciding how to continue to work with students who are quarantined, either for COVID-like absences, regular absences, or for contact tracing. And initially, we thought that we would require teachers to Zoom with their students. So they're teaching their students in person and virtually. Like Dr. Galligan said, and we've gone through a lot of iterations. That was a cause of stress for a lot of teachers, especially depending on the grade level, like imagining first grade considerations and second grade. And so after a lot of iterations and discussions about what was the most appropriate, we determined which teachers would Zoom in person and virtually outside of absences. And then for absences, we decided that the schools could choose how they would work with the students with some certain tight, loose expectations. And the tight expectations were that the teachers need to maintain Canvas. And so when they're working in person with students and when students are online, so so the expectations are seamless, whether you're in person or online, that Canvas would be maintained. It was optional to Zoom with students daily. So some teachers do choose to Zoom in with their students for live instruction. Some choose for small group instruction, but at a minimum, they need to check in with students. And so they are doing that differently from school to school. But Dr. Z, Ms. Miner, and myself, we meet with the principals weekly. And this is one of the topics we're talking about this month is how are your teachers working with the students? And at least the schools I've spoken with, I mean, it's a variety. They all seem to be doing kind of audits of Canvas to make sure, they see the importance now of staying on track so that the kids have easy access to what they're doing in the classroom. And many of them actually are choosing to Zoom because they find it easier, but it does depend on the grade level and the circumstance.
Go ahead, Ms. Frank.
So to get back to the original point, so a couple of things. I know when I was teaching, kids who were congested, sneezing, coughing, they came to school all the time. And with cold and flu season ramping up, I just think that there should be a way for those students who maybe have a cold or maybe they have the flu and it's not COVID and the parents aren't going to run out and get, a COVID test, or they're not going to do that because they think, well, it's a cold, they'll get over it. I think it would perhaps encourage those parents to keep their kids at home if they had a way to Zoom into the classroom. And I think that it needs to be standardized across the district, because that's why, we're getting emails from parents saying, well, at my school, it's being done this way, or I have another kid, it's being done another way. And that becomes very confusing for parents. I understand the desire for teacher autonomy, but under the circumstances, I think that the expectations need to be equitable and consistent district-wide. And I really would encourage allowing students who have COVID-like symptoms to be able to Zoom into those classrooms so that you can say to the parents, no, you can keep them home. They're not going to miss their work. They can still Zoom into the classroom. I think that would be beneficial, because otherwise they're going to come to school. You don't know what they've got. You've got to send them home. I'm just telling you, I had sick kids in my classroom all the time.
Maybe I can jump in here too. One major difference than last year is Canvas. So in the old days, if you missed school, you had to call the teacher, call the office. They had to make the packet, send it down to the office. You stopped by with your car, picked up the packet for 3 days or whatever that you were out. Today, you are not missing anything because Canvas is up to date. So if we're doing 2+2 in the room, we're doing 2+2 on Canvas as well. So the student never misses school, quote unquote, because they can go get the actual homework, get the lesson, and it's video based, etc. It's so maybe they don't feel the connection like they would watching it live, but they don't have to wait for the homework anymore, which is a plus to our system. So, but I don't disagree with the concept that a student feels more connected when they can Zoom in. But to Ms. Tweedy's point, we want to make sure we don't stress the teachers out as well. So it's a delicate balance. But good point. Thanks.
And I think I want to just piggyback on the equity part. I don't know that it's great to be at one school in the 5th grade and you can stay home sick, or you should stay home sick and you get to Zoom in, and then you go to another school and you're in the 5th grade and you can't. So I realize it's capacity and who can do what they can do on a campus, but I think that's something we might want to figure out. Ms. Reed?
To that point, I think that there needs to be a standardized process for understanding when you can Zoom in and when you can't Zoom in. So standardized across the district. So I understand that sometimes parents are having to email or call the nurse. Sometimes it's the principal. Sometimes it's the teacher. But I haven't seen anything come out. And I've got 4 kids in the district, and I haven't gotten any information in regards to who I would contact if my child was sick and I wanted them to Zoom in class. So I would say that there just might need to be more of a process to consider that way. And you know, I had one student that was quarantined, and God bless the AP who had to call me. And I think that he was a little frightened that he had to call a board member to let them know that one of her students was quarantined for exposure. But I kept my other 3 kids home until we knew that he had had a negative COVID test. And he got 2. And then had another one of my kids who just was really, really tired one day. And we kept that kid home. And in order to return to school, we had to go take him to go get another COVID test. So I understand that it's inconvenient to have your students at home because they don't feel well. But had we not had the ability to go get a rapid COVID test and pay for it, my child would have been at home for 10 days because of COVID-like symptoms, because he was really tired. And I don't know that that would have been an important symptom for the majority of parents to keep their kid home. And I understand that that is a COVID-like symptom, and that's a mild symptom, but sometimes that's the only symptom that somebody has. And so I do want to make sure that we have processes and systems in place to support our parents and support our teachers. I know that our teachers are stressed because they are scared that they're going to get sick. A lot of the emails that I've gotten. And I want to make sure that they understand that the district is doing everything they can to encourage families to keep their sick or symptomatic kids home, and they're going to have the same access to education. So that's one thing. The second thing, and this is my 2 cents and my thoughts on the dashboard, and take it for what it is, but the emails and questions that I've been getting and the information that I've read on social media and different parent groups is that parents don't understand why we don't have a running tally of how many COVID cases we've had, or how many students in quarantine are out of school, or how many cases have been resolved. And so because that data is not readily accessible, they feel like when I say we're, as the district, not being as transparent as we could be. And I understand that there are different opinions and thoughts on that sometimes the numbers can look really scary. Other people might think that the numbers look really good if the cases are being resolved and kids are getting back to school. So if I had control of the dashboard, I would put the running total. I would put how many cases have been resolved, and I would put how many students are in quarantine. And the reason I would put how many students are in quarantine because of exposure is that I really want parents and students to understand that when they get sick and they come to school with symptoms, it doesn't just impact them, it impacts a whole bunch of other kids too. And so I know that there's been some talk back and forth on social media. Sometimes kids are asymptomatic, right? And we go at school and we go back 48 hours. And I get that, but I do know that there have been a number of students that have come to school thinking that it's allergies or thinking that it's just a little bit of a cold, and it has been COVID. And so I really want to keep schools open. I think that the majority of teachers and parents and students want to keep our schools open, but we can only do that if everybody is playing on the same team and we're all headed towards the right goal. So that's it. Sorry, Ms. Ordway.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I'll just, President Ordway, can respond a little bit to that, and then we'll go on to Dr. Galligan. I think to the point of the instruction, I think we can look at that, but I do want to reiterate that not everything is going to be the same with this, that there is, as was noted by one of the comments, there are capacity issues for us. And as Dr. Finch, you talked about in terms of the stress level, if you will, on some of our folks, that we are also mindful of that. And so because of that, there will likely be at times some differences across the campuses for that. But that said, I do believe by and large, the campuses are doing a very good job with this. I know that they are providing things like screencasts to our families in terms of how to communicate with the school if your child is isolated or put into self-quarantine, and that others are having their teachers contact. And so I know that in general, again, I would say that I think our schools are doing a good job, and I'm proud of the teachers and their resilience and the administrators well with what they're doing. And so with that, I'll go to Dr. Galligan and return to learning. Dr. Galligan?
Absolutely. Just to go back to your request, we will definitely pull our team back together, and this was something that Ms. O'Brien asked for earlier, so that we would have something more standardized than different across our campuses for that. Just know that Paula and Kathy really did work through all of the potential scenarios with the primary, K2, our elementary, middle, and high school. And at that time, it was determined to have campuses make that decision. But I think we can all agree that we probably need to be more similar than we are dissimilar. And so we'll bring that team together probably after the Thanksgiving break so that we can start the second semester with some standards in place. With that said, then, I just want to talk to you about 4 things. You are probably aware that the CDC updated their definition for close contact, and they added that word cumulative. So now their definition of close contact is someone who is within 6 feet of an infected person for a cumulative total of 15 minutes or more over a 24-hour period. Because of that change in the definition, we really thought we needed to go back to the Return to Learning group and our campuses to talk about small group instruction. Because as you may be aware, since July, we have really said to our teachers and our schools that small group instruction is the way to go, especially when we were on virtual for all. We all know that small group instruction is much more effective than large group instruction, whether you are in person or you are on a virtual system. So with that, we pulled just a small subset of the Return to Learning team together last week and then came back again this week. So last week, we just went over the definition, and I asked the few individuals that were there, and they were represented by teachers and administrators, to go back to their schools and just talk with your teams about what would make sense for an adjustment of small group instruction. And with that, we met yesterday, and they came with some input from their schools, and we crafted some tight and loose guidance for our campuses in light of this change in the close contact definition. The tight really includes 3 different things. One is podding, and Gary mentioned that, and that we are working very diligently to pod students. But when we think about small group instruction, podding our students and keeping accurate records for the small groups that they work with in a week or 2, and specifically keeping that pod of students together minimally for a week. That helps us with that record keeping when we do close contact tracing. We also talked about maintaining wherever and whenever possible that 6 feet. So we know in some of our classes, our special ed classrooms or our reading specialist rooms, that they meet with smaller groups of students and they have a larger space. So there is no exception. Students should be 6 feet apart. And then, of course, a time guidance. Since we are bound by a 15-minute cumulative total, to keep those times when you are working with kids in small groups to no more than 10 minutes. And that's not a whole lot different than what we had encouraged before this definition changed. But this guidance document will be shared with our administrators at this Friday's admin update. The next one that I want to talk about is in-person and remote learning in the spring semester. And I know that this was a very loud topic when we were going into our in-person transition. And we have already begun to receive emails from parents again. And what I would like you all and our audience to understand is that teaching kids in person and remotely is not an easy endeavor, especially when you have the majority of your kids in person and a handful that are remote. Trying to provide the same level of engagement and ability to stay in touch with those students may sound easy because we're all Zooming all the time, but we're not Zooming with 20, 25, 30 kids also with us. It's a challenge. Some of our teachers will do well with it, but it's still a challenge. With that said, we worked with our administrators who went and talked with their leadership teams, and our high schools will maintain what they have in place this semester. What I would like to say with that, though, is if let's say a freshman student has band, and we are providing that distance learning for that student for that fine arts course, that there's a reason we have the Deer Valley Online Learning Program and we have the part-time options for kids. Rather than that student being distance learning for all 6 courses on that high school campus, let's encourage that student to be distance learning on that campus for that one course, and then take the rest of their courses, Algebra 1, ELA 1, 1-2, Algebra 1-2, in DVOLP. What that will do is it will reduce the level of stress on our brick and mortar teachers. We have the program. It's been in place for many years, and the courses are taught by high school teachers. So there's no reason why we cannot encourage our students who have a single class that they need to have on their brick and mortar not to take the rest of their courses through DVOLP. I would also say for that our students who are remote in that brick and mortar setting, and even in our Deer Valley Online Learning Program courses, who are failing more than 1, 2, 3, upward to 5 and 6 courses remotely, that our schools are counseling and working with those parents that this option is not working, and that having your child in person is going to help them be successful in their academics and support them socially and emotionally. What we have right now are students who are losing credit and will not be on their grad progress for when they exit our system. Not only that, we have students that have not engaged at all and will be withdrawn from our school district. So, not to sound harsh, but when we have those situations, I can tell you that our schools, our high schools, and our counselors are working closely with parents and encouraging them to look at what's going on with their student in those remote situations and encouraging them to rethink it for spring semester. Whether the parents will or won't, we know that that is truly a parental decision, but many of our parents are not aware that their child is not participating. And so those are the conversations we're having both at brick and mortar and through DVOLP. For middle school, the program that we have had for DVOA students that they can participate in as an elective in 7th and 8th grade is band and choir. We will maintain that as well. The challenge that we are finding with band and choir at middle school is that we have asked that our students participate through Zoom 2 to 3 times a week and participate in the Canvas courses that the teachers are maintaining. We have a number of students across each of our brick and mortar who are DVOA students who are failing because they are not attending the Zooms, nor are they completing their Canvas courses. So at the end of this semester, those students who have not been successful in participating in the virtual Zooms for their band and choir will be removed from that particular elective and then offered the elective that we have for DVOA. For the students that are participating virtually in their Zoom meetings and maintaining their Canvas courses in their band and choir, will absolutely continue with those students. Our goal is to help kids who are remote be as successful as they can be in the courses that they are taking. Then the other one is our K-8 Renaissance students. And our Renaissance teachers have bent over backwards to support the students that they serve, both at Canyon Springs and at Highland Lakes. We have asked them to please continue with that remote and in-person learning for their kindergarten through 8th grade students. And they are going to do that, just knowing that for many of our younger grade level kids, even though they're highly gifted, that is still a difficult endeavor for the teacher as well as the kids. But I know, Ms. O'Brien, this was a question that you wanted to have addressed, and I had said we would address it in November. I cannot express how proud I am and how much respect I have for our teachers who are teaching in person and remotely. And it's not just the ones that we're talking about here. We are still talking about the teachers that are Zooming kids when they are out on quarantine, and that is happening more often than not. And so I hope we don't make light of the challenge that we find ourselves in and our teachers find themselves in being everything to everyone in this situation for instruction. So I give them kudos, my respect, and my thanks that they are continuing to do this for us and for their children. I want to talk a little bit about DVOLP and DVOA. We had our parent surveys go out, and I'll just start with DVOA. That survey went out, I believe, on November 3rd, and it will close on November 13th. There are 3,370 students currently in K-8 DVOA. We have had 1,322 respond. Of those responding, 1,034, that's about 78% of those responding, have indicated that they will remain online, and 280, about 21%, have indicated that they are returning back to their brick and mortar campus in January. I also wanted to share with you the percentages for our special education students because we know that our special education students are struggling in a remote environment more often than not. So for DVOA, we have 536 special ed students, K-8. There have been 195 responses to date. 150 of those, that would be 77%, indicated that they will remain online in January, and 44 or 23% will return to in-person learning on their home campus. So that's for DVOA. For DVOLP, we have about 466 full-time online students. So far, 203 have responded to the survey, and of those responding, 163 or 80% have indicated that they will remain online in the spring semester, and 40 or 20% have indicated they will return to in-person learning on their home campus. Similarly, for special ed, we have 71 special education full-time students in DVOLP courses. 36 have responded to the survey. So out of that 71, 36 have responded to the survey. 30 of those, or 83%, have indicated they will remain in an online environment through the DVOLP courses, and 6 or 17% have indicated they will return to their home campus. So that just gives you an initial feel about a week into the surveys for both of those. I want to thank Mary Beth and Scott for keeping us informed on how those surveys are progressing and letting us know. We do know that Principal Schubert has said that she's had conversations with some parents who say they are not going to fill out the survey, that they believe that we are asking too early. And although she explains to them why we are asking at this point in time, that it is mainly for us to better understand how we will have to shift staff between this semester and next semester, we do understand that there will be a portion of parents who may not complete that survey and that we will have to do follow-up with those parents potentially after Thanksgiving. The last thing that I want to talk with you about, and Dr. Chunis and I will probably tag team this one. I know there have been questions about DVOA instruction and time with the teacher. And again, this is an area that Principal Schubert and Dr. Chunis are working closely with Jenna and myself so that we have more standardization in place. What I will say is that our K2 provides pretty significant Zooming time, synchronous time for parents to choose to participate in. Right now, all Zoom and synchronous opportunities are all optional for parents, and that is for this semester. I will say that we are working with 3rd through 6th grade to standardize what is provided for our kids. So all teachers are providing in some way SEL, generally 20 to 30 minutes daily. After that, there are some changes or differences between our grade levels. Paula has met with Ms. Schubert, and today we also met again so that we could talk not only about elementary, but specifically about middle school. And I believe many of you have received emails probably from our middle school parents. We are more dissimilar in middle school than we are similar in what we are offering for those Zoom or synchronous options. And that is an area that we intend to continue to refine and work with Jenna and ensure that we are more standardized there. In addition, we are looking at math, where we have some situations where there is very limited interaction with some of our part-time DVOA teachers. And our part-time teachers may teach a single section of DVOA, or it may teach multiple sections but not be a full-time DVOA teacher. So we are working on that to put a solution in place through the end of this semester. Our goal is to fix that and have, again, standardized expectations for synchronous instruction when we start the second semester. So I just wanted you to be aware that this is not something that we are ignoring at all, and that we are working closely with each other, staffing, what we have available with our teachers, as well as our Canvas courses, and then expectations for teachers to provide that synchronous time with their kids. All teachers do provide 60 minutes of office hours at our elementaries Monday through Friday, and at our middle schools generally Fridays by appointment or open time on Fridays. So office hours are fairly standard. It's the synchronous instruction. With that, I'll turn it over to the next person or any questions you may have.
Next person, please.
Good evening again, President Ordway, governing board members. I'm going to be reviewing our substitute appreciation and other substitute updates, our teacher mentor updates, staffing adjustments that we intend to begin to make for second semester. And as always, anytime we get airtime, we like to talk about reporting, encouraging our staff members to report their COVID needs. So let's get started with the next slide. Certified and custodial substitutes. I first want to send a shout out to my team who do indeed work tirelessly each day, trying to recruit substitutes and fill vacancies, and come up with as many creative strategies as possible to build this pipeline in this very difficult environment. And I do want you to know that every single week, this team is successful in adding more substitutes to our pool. The challenge will continue to be those that are eager in the beginning and sometimes change their mind as time goes by. But we do continue to pursue. So I'd like to share with you, this is as of today, we do have 75 long-term substitutes who are actively working for us each day. These substitutes are in either vacancies or in long-term absences, such as a pregnancy leave, an FMLA leave, or perhaps a child care FFCRA that has a longer length of time. We also have 279 short-term subs accepting short-term assignments. So what I asked for specifically here was to learn how many people are picking up these short-term vacancies, because we do have nearly 500 substitutes right now. 279 of those are picking up our short-term options. And then we do have 50 additional subs picked up so far from the beginning of that school year. So those broken out each week because we are picking them up on a weekly basis. I'd also like to update you on our partnership with our contracting agency for our custodial vacancies. We do currently have 5 long-term custodial subs who are filling our nighttime vacancies. I shared with you previously that we are prioritizing the nighttime vacancies so that the cleaning can occur in preparation for the next day. Those who do have a shorter term, the vacancy could not be a vacancy, but there could be an absence for a short period of time. We are working with those principals on short-term options. For example, I spoke with the principal today who was looking at a couple of her paras who could be interested in performing that function after the school day, at least the disinfecting function. And we would be able to pay that employee to complete that until the permanent staff member steps back in. I do also want to share with you that we do have one location that does not have an evening custodian yet. So we're working with this agency to get someone out to that location, and the facilities department is working with that location to meet their daily needs or each evening need. Our new teacher mentoring program, I thought it might be interesting to you to share with you this evening that our 3 DVUSD teacher mentors have completed 1,290 visits with first and second year teachers since the beginning of this school year. So obviously in the beginning, this was done solely virtually. And now our mentors are visiting both classrooms and they are visiting our teachers that are new and teaching in DVUSD. Some trends that they have noticed is the differences between managing a classroom online for our brand new teachers that have never actually independently managed a classroom, and now starting October, it's like starting all over again because you're learning how to manage a classroom physically in front of you. So it is different, and it's like starting the year brand new. They also are providing a lot of instructional support differently than perhaps in years past because we are instructing differently. We are providing a lot of support on Canvas. And then obviously day-to-day operational support, again, in a very unique year. But there are just some things that are always a need for a teacher, and that is encouragement, lesson design, and something that tends to come up at this point in the year is a solid partnership with Student Support Services. This month, they will be providing a lot of support to both our special education teachers and our general education teachers in an effort to support with behavior plans and understanding of different disabilities. Staffing update, Gail mentioned that the survey went out to both DVOA parents and DVOLP parents. That survey data will be coming into Human Resources around November 12th, early data, and then the survey will close and we will get the final data. We are evaluating this information to identify where we need to adjust staffing. I know you understand, but it is worth reminding, I suppose, that It doesn't all work out cleanly and perfectly. We don't know yet if there could be a group of 20 students that collectively agreed that they no longer want to be online and they're all going back to the same grade at the same school. That's going to cause, honestly, for us, an easier staffing adjustment. It's an obvious staffing adjustment. For the most part, these are going to be widespread, and we're going to have to take a look at how many staff members might be needed at the brick and mortar site while still keeping in mind high priority of social distancing as much as possible. We also, and we are proud of this, especially when we talk to our peers and their struggles, that we worked very hard since the beginning to provide 2 options to our parents. But what that did for our staff is provide an option where our staff members could work online full time. This is a good thing because we've been able to preserve many positions and many staff members who otherwise may have resigned because they felt they were at risk. That is definitely a celebration. The challenge, though, in operating 2 separate entities is that you just might not have the staff to perform that function. We believe that we do, but it will be a challenge if our students begin to shift back over to the brick and mortar. There is potential that it won't quite even out perfectly, but we will do our best to adjust, and happily we adjusted into those 2 entities just fine, and we believe that we can do that adjustment again coming for the month of January. And then, as I mentioned, we always want to remind anyone listening, any of our staff members listening, that it's very, very, very important that if you do not feel well or you have you are in process for testing for COVID-19, or someone in your home is, or you've come in close contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, that you please immediately report that to covidreport.dvusd.org, and a human resources representative will be in contact with you very, very soon. And I would like to share with the board that we do start at 5 a.m. On our weekdays. We do monitor this all weekend long. We start phone calls at 7 a.m. We stop phone calls at 8 p.m., but we do continue to monitor the email all evening long too, just so that we are as timely as possible so that we are staffing appropriately every day.
Thank you, Jenna. In our second to last slide, I want to take this moment to thank our school nurses again. They are truly superheroes. And so in the month of November, when we have Thanksgiving, and in the spirit of thanks, I do want to make sure that we recognize the work that our school nurses are doing. They really and truly are champions out there on the front line and working to keep our community safe. And so I know we all extend our gratitude to the work that our school nurses are doing. And with that, it goes to our last slide for questions and answers. And if there are any additional questions on President Ordway, we are certainly happy to do so with some answers.
Ms. Tweedy, or Dr. Tweedy, Ms. Tweedy, you have one
I
question?
just have a quick one and a request for information, I guess, from Dr. Miglarino, or Mr. Miglarino. So for the filters getting delivered to the classrooms, there's people downloading the manuals online, and I don't even know if it's the correct manual. And they're saying that it's designed for 300 to 600 square foot, the ones that are going in the classrooms. Can you put in the board report the manual that came with those filters and the square footage they're designed for? Because I don't know if what they're saying is what they're pulling is even right. So thank you.
All right. Is that it? Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, nurses.
All right, so we are ready to move on to public comments. Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
thought she was having questions. I do have a couple questions.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Apologize.
Mrs. O'Brien is not apologizing. I just didn't look over far enough.
First of all, Dr. Galligan, thank you so much for getting that answer regarding second semester and our high school and other special groups in those classes. And I do understand that what our teachers and staff are taking on is a Herculean effort. And as most teachers do across the state, but most definitely in our district, they step up and do what is best for our students. So my most heartfelt gratitude for them taking on that challenge again in second semester and helping us with our students. Has that information been shared with the parents yet in an official communication?
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, no, we were waiting for this board meeting tonight, and that information will go out. Well, it will go out on Monday in our parent update, but our high schools have been meeting with kids and having those conversations already.
Okay, thank you very much. I just didn't want to, I received that question earlier this week and didn't want to be out of place to answer a constituent's question. Can you give me an update on where we are? And I don't know if it's Dr. Galligan or Dr. Tunis on DVOA, our grades, teachers staying up to date with grading.
President Ordway, Ms. O'Brien, we'll have to look into that and get back with you. I do know that we have had just a couple of itty-bitty challenges, which are not itty-bitty to parents and kids, in some of our elective courses in grades that are in Canvas transitioning over to Power School. But we'll find out about grades and get information, if not in this Friday's update, no later than next Friday.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Galligan.
You may now go.
Okay, moving on to public comments. The board invites public comment on the district's business in general and on any agenda item in specific. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes. To accommodate all speakers within the 30-minute overall limit, the board president may shorten speakers' times. Vulgarity, disruptive conduct, or remarks disrespecting employees by name will not be allowed. The governing board cannot discuss or act on any items not listed on the agenda. Board members may respond to criticism, ask staff to review a matter, or request a future agenda item. So we have 2 public comments that came in. The first is from Jennifer Clubb, and the topic is the DVOA curriculum. And her statement is, with the upcoming due date of the survey to decide whether our children are staying enrolled in DVOA, going back to in-person learning, or leaving the district for a better solution, we feel that there are outstanding questions yet to be answered by the district. 1, what efforts are being taken to improve the overall curriculum of DVOA? Currently, the platform feels thrown together with inconsistent learning plans and errors in the modules. The workloads don't appear to be considerate of the grade level or even aware of the other courses' workloads. What is being done to ensure quality control? 2, what steps are being taken other than the legal minimum effort to ensure our children's safety with the growing surge in COVID-19 cases? There lacks the needed transparency to feel confident that the district is looking out for the well-being of the students and staff. Students are being quarantined without notification to all the parents of even the classroom so that folks can make an educated, informed decision on whether to pull our children out or keep them home. The district is not doing everything that they can do, and yet we consistently see the superintendent taking victory laps on social media, which would seem to be in stark contrast to the facts. And the second comes from Beth LeBlanc, and the topic is COVID and school opening/closure. And her statement is, President Ordway and board members, I have 2 children that attend SDOHS. I am writing today to ask that you use the previous metrics presented by the AZDHS for closure of schools. Currently, DVUSD is in the red for positive cases per 100,000 population. This data is 2 weeks old and only represents the positive cases for those that have been tested. It has been scientifically proven that children can be asymptomatic and would therefore be less likely to be tested. This suggests that the number of positive cases on our school campuses are well above the 108.58 per 100,000 and 6.53% positivity reported within our zip codes. More and more students are being sent into quarantine or isolation due to exposure or possible exposure. Some parents are not reporting that their child has had exposure outside of school because they don't believe the risk is as great as science proves it to be, and they don't want their child out of school for 10 to 14 days. This puts the adult staff and students' families at even greater risk. It is your duty to protect all members of the DVUSD community, and I believe that with the numbers being as high as they are, the safest place to learn is at home. I hope you consider the safety and well-being of all members of the DVUSD community and determine that the best course of action is to close schools until the number of positive COVID cases is down within district boundaries and all of Maricopa County. Thank you, Beth LeBlanc.
And that's it for public comment? So we can move to 5A, old business.
Okay, 5A, I move that the governing board approve the recommendation by administration for the 3rd through 6th grade science curriculum materials adoption.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Motion passed. There's no nays. 6 consent agenda.
I didn't, okay, there's the. I move that the governing board accept the consent agenda items 6A through 6J as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 7A. Wow, look at you guys go.
I think we just
Are
approved a new
we clapping
employee.
for you? While we're waiting to vote, did you want to say who that is, Monica? Can you introduce her, please? Yay! And you cannot show favoritism to the Skyhawks. Anyway, moving on to,
Okay.
where are we?
We are on 7A. I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendations to pre-approve the addenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 No opposition. Moving on. 7B.
Okay. I move that the governing board will approve the recommendation for the superintendent goals for assessment and enrollment as indicated on the revised attachment.
A second.
Oh.
Or do we have?
need to read it?
Do we need to read those changes?
Yeah, you wrote, they're written up, right?
Is it written up?
Yep. It's in board docs there.
No, it's
I
not.
can, oh, they're not in there. Well, I can state it out loud. That would be
Can
fine too.
you,
Little summary.
It's not.
no, I
It's-
wanted the exact thing so we
Looking for the
can,
exact wording.
yeah. Didn't,
Mm-mm.
In the attachment.
It's not. You don't understand. We don't have an attachment in
Oh.
our board docs.
No attachment. Oh, probably have to refresh. That's probably what it is. It was Dr. Chunis probably has it.
Dr. Tunis,
Is
do you
that
have
printed
that?
already?
The wording for the new, for the evolved
Yes,
goal?
Could you read it for us?
I can.
Here it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
You have to refresh. So
I got it.
okay. Mrs. O'Brien, would you read that?
It says to change the geometry 1-2 comprehensive spring 2020 assessment to the geometry AZ M2 grade 10 mimic, and to change the enrollment date from October 14th with final enrollment data collected on April 10th.
Okay, now we're ready to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. 7C.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the Arizona School Facilities Board, SFB, Preventative Maintenance Plan Report for 2019-20.
Second.
All those in favor? Unless we want some kind of an explanation. on that? I mean, I've read it. No? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. 7D.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the gifted scope and sequence for Deer Valley Unified School District.
A second.
Any discussion?
Is there a presentation?
Did you want to give a presentation? No. Okay. All those in favor say aye.
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 7E.
I move that the governing board accept the administration's recommendation to approve the voluntary developer per unit agreement with Funk Family Enterprises LLC, don't laugh, and Surinder and Rajender, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Sanhan for the Sterling Vista development.
Second.
Jim, did you want to tell us anything about that, or are we good?
President Orway, members of the board, Dr. Finch, just real quickly, this is our standard agreement that we use. This is an infill project, about 61 home sites being planned. It is being rezoned, so we weren't currently planning on it adding additional students in this vicinity in an area that is already has student capacity issues at both Stetson Hills and Sandra Day O'Connor, the schools in this attendance area. So this will help mitigate the impact that this will cause. And one point of note, the amount per unit was negotiated because by the time they're ready to deliver homes, we think that there could be circumstances that would mitigate the school capacity at those two campuses. So, but this is the standard agreement that we have used for probably close to 10
Forever.
years.
I appreciate that. Any questions? Thank you, Jim. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right. E. No, we did E. Governing board reports. Mrs. Reed.
Thank you. Just want to say congratulations to Mrs. O'Brien for winning her city council race for the city of Phoenix, and to Mrs. Ordway for winning her reelection to governing board, and to our other two governing board governing board members elect that will be joining us. I look forward to serving with Miss Paperman. She'll be a new addition to our board. I think she will do an amazing job representing all parties in the district. Also want to congratulate Dr. Tweedy. She had to leave early for completing her doctorate. Just want to recognize that tomorrow's Veterans Day and thank all of our parents and staff members who have served in military forces. We appreciate the sacrifices that you and your family have made in order to protect our freedoms that we have and that we value today. I attended the Maricopa County ASBA meeting, and I think Mrs. O'Brien has more information to share about that. And then just want to thank all of our teachers and parents who participated in parent-teacher conferences a few weeks ago. I know that it got a little chaotic for some of our teachers who had so many different Zoom calls, that I appreciate you making all the time over that week and a half to make sure that you are available to your online students and your in-person students. So thank you so much. And thank you to our teachers who are have been asked to teach online and in person next semester. I know that it's difficult and it's been a big ask, and I appreciate you taking those extra steps in order to provide the best education you can for your students. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Reed. And I'd also like to congratulate President Ordway on her reelection, and congratulations to our other two board members that will be joining us in January as well. Would like to say thank you all for making the Mark Herna presentation regarding CTE. That was the second time I saw him once in person and then got to see him online. It was just as good the second time, or maybe even better. So thank you for providing that to our parents and our community members. The Union Park ribbon cutting was awesome. I know it was a little different, but given our COVID situation, thank you very much for making that a success. I did attend the Arizona School Boards Association Maricopa County meeting virtually, and am pleased to acknowledge my fellow board members and that we received the All Board Award, which means that all 5 board members were receiving professional development, and I should say, taking professional development classes and to be the best board members they can be. So I'm proud to be a part of that. And also, board member Mrs. Reed received 2 awards for her professional development, certificate of boardmanship, and associate of boardmanship this meeting, which means she was very busy this last year receiving professional development classes or education. ASBA also had a great online equity webinar yesterday and today. I was able to attend today, and they have a new workbook out. I'm hopeful that some of my fellow board members, they weren't able to participate this time, but will participate soon. And I also would like to thank all of our veterans, and it did look like on social media that we did have some Veterans Day celebrations. So kudos once again to our staff and teachers and administration for pivoting and figuring out how to continue some very important traditions and celebrations and honors in what has been a difficult year. So thank you, Dr. Finch, and to our schools that continue to do that. And thank you once again to all of you for your Herculean efforts. I hope everybody is able to have a relaxing Thanksgiving, which is just a couple weeks away, because we won't see you before then. Thank you.
Ms. Frank?
Well, I'd just like to echo thank you to everybody here in this room, and as well as all of our teachers and staff who aren't here in this room. I know it's been a really difficult year, and you guys have all done just amazing work this year. Congratulations to Mrs. O'Brien. Congratulations to Dr. Tweedy. That's going to be fun to say now. As well as congratulations to all of our newly elected board members, and of course, Mrs. Ordway, for your reelection. It's hard to believe my term of office end date is fast approaching. So anyway, just thank you everybody, and have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
If
And
you're
that's-
on parole,
Yeah, we'll
that
let her up for
means
good
that
behavior.
you have a parole person that you report to. So I
That's
think
Dr.
you just want to
Finch.
have that get free for a little bit on Tuesdays. So just to wrap it up, I wanted to say thank you for everyone that's in this room, whether you're sitting here, you're watching, or someone is going to talk about this great meeting tomorrow to you. I would like the people that resist the "I heard this" thing that goes around as a fact. So when you "I heard this" person, please send an email to whomever I heard this about, so they could explain to you what they might have heard or not heard, because it gets very difficult when it's the game of telephone, but now I think it's called social media game. I heard this from, and then it turns into something that never really was. And so I'd appreciate that. It helps our employees and our students be able to concentrate on what they're there for. The veterans tomorrow, or Veterans Day tomorrow, I have been in this district for a long time, and I have enjoyed so many in-person Veterans Day celebrations. The COVID creativity, which may be a weird way to coin a phrase, but what our classrooms, our students, and our teachers have figured out how to celebrate things, it is absolutely amazing. So I think that when we're done with the ugly part of COVID, and it just becomes another one of those flus. The things that we have learned through COVID, we will keep because some of that stuff has turned into best practice. So thank you, everyone, and happy Thanksgiving. And Sheila, you sit over there and you answer our phone calls. You are just like this beautiful gem. So I wanted to thank you out loud in front of everyone so your face could turn red behind your mask. Dr. Finch, go ahead.
I'll finish up too. I would like to echo that Ms. Sheila has been a great addition to the super's office. No question about that. I just want to do a little reflection on the election. Prop 208 did pass. That has pluses and minuses to it. I think the legislature basically stayed the same. Not much change there. Probably even the Senate probably got more conservative. So it'll be interesting to see the impact of Prop 208 on us in the future. Obviously, our student enrollment, which we talked about in executive session, we aim to pull those students back sooner than later because we have such an awesome program, awesome teachers, awesome curricula and opportunities for students. So we expect them back, but we want them sooner than later. I also want to put a shout out to the Terramar Titans, Principal Weiser. She did a virtual Veterans Assembly, and it's probably recorded on her website. So go check it out. It was top shelf. She even had a general speak. And he did an excellent job, and they did a perspective that I hadn't heard before. So go ahead and listen to it. It was really well done. It talked about really the compassionate side of the military and what actually happens behind the scenes, and I thought that was very interesting. So shout out to Ms. Weiser as well. Did a nice job, and I know a lot of our campuses did a great job on the Veterans Day in circumstances that were not the best. So they did a nice job. Appreciate it. Again, thank you to all the staff that help us move the ball down the field. It's been an interesting year, one we will write books about in the future, but it's Deer Valley was doing a great job, and I want to thank them, the team in here and the team out there that keep up the great work. Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
I suppose we could make a motion to what?
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.